I'm James Rosone.
And I'm Miranda Watson. We're the husband and wife writing team that created the military thriller Monroe Doctrine series and the military sci-fi series The Rise of the Republic.
We have some additional content we'd like to share with you guys today, and we hope you'll find it informative and entertaining. We're planning to create more videos similar to this in the future.
As always, please like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get started.
Chapter 25. Love Fest. 24th April 1991. 3 Corb Sector. Al Ain, United Arab Emirates. During the early morning hours the day prior, elements of TF Sa'al had maneuvered to the north side of Al Ain, while TF Abu Bakr had maneuvered to the south side. TF Tariq had made a show of force once the sun came up, keeping the attention of the Iraqi 1st Infantry Division in Al Ain. Loudspeakers accompanied TF Tariq and blared throughout the day that the Iraqi forces should surrender and prevent the destruction of the city. There was no intention of destroying Al Ain, but the Iraqi commander didn't know that, nor did the populace, which was in a panic. Leaflets were dropped from the air telling Iraqi soldiers to lay down their weapons and walk out. They would be treated well as prisoners for war. The city was nearly surrounded by the evening of April 20th. "General, we have a problem," Brigadier General Khalil Abdallah, commander of the Northern Omani Brigade, stated to Major General Muhanna Abbas, the commander of TF Sa'al. "We have a problem, General, or you have a problem and want to make it my problem?" Abbas asked, with sarcasm dripping from each word. They did not get along, as Abbas was a Saudi national and Abdallah was an Omani national. There had been a bit of a power struggle to see who the overall commander of the host nations would be, and Abdallah had lost. "Well, it is my problem, but it is about to become your problem by close of business tomorrow," Abdallah said. "And what is this problem I am about to have?" Abbas asked, as he poured himself another cup of tea, not offering one to Abdallah. "We are receiving prisoners from Al Ain. They are melting out of the city like goat's milk through cheesecloth. Tomorrow, either I won't be able to conduct combat operations as I will be guarding these people, or I can just tell them to walk back to Kuwait, or I can turn them over to you in a POW compound. What is your choice?" Abdallah asked. "Don't be foolish. We cannot just turn them loose. They will simply rejoin other units," Abbas said, sipping his tea. "So that gives you 2 choices. Which one will it be? Should I stop conducting combat operations or let you take them off my hands?" Abdallah said, starting to enjoy sticking it to Abdallah. "Well, you cannot stop conducting combat operations. The 3 Corps commander expects us to lead the forces into Abu Dhabi. I cannot allow you to pull out to guard prisoners." Abbas had a worried look on his face. "So that settles it. Where is the POW compound?" Abdallah asked. Abbas had not even thought about setting up a POW compound. "I am sure that 3rd Corps has designated a location and assigned some military police to establish such a place. I do not recall where it is. Go speak with Colonel Jabal, my operations officer, and he can tell you where it is located," Abbas said in a dismissive manner. "I have other important matters to attend to right now." "In that case, General, I will leave you to your important matters. Have a good day," Abdallah said as he departed. He already knew exactly where the POW compound was and had been delivering prisoners there for the past 4 hours. He just wanted to jerk Abbas's chain a bit. Sergeant Rami Habib was catching some sleep when someone kicked him gently in the foot. "Hey, Rami, wake up. Are you awake?" a familiar voice said. "I am now, Lieutenant," Rami responded and was thinking, "I wonder if the American lieutenants are as dumb as this one. Why is it necessary to wake me? I was having a beautiful dream. She was just—" "Listen, do you smell that?" Lieutenant Iqbal said. Rami sat up and sniffed the air for a moment. "I don't hear anything, Lieutenant, but I do smell fresh baked bread." "I think it is coming from that house over there on the edge of town. It has a light on, and I have seen a couple of guys go in. Maybe we should go over and get some fresh bread for the platoon," Iqbal suggested. With that, Rami stood up and they cautiously walked the 200 meters to the house. Rami entered first and immediately noticed 6 Iraqi soldiers waiting to buy bread. Suddenly, he was grabbed from behind in a headlock. He struggled as the Iraqi soldier began rubbing his knuckles on Rami's head, just like his older brother had done when he was little. A swift elbow into the Iraqi's stomach released the headlock, and Rami turned and swung his fist into the Iraqi soldier's jaw. He was winding up for another punch when the Iraqi started laughing. "You still punch like a girl," the Iraqi said. Rami then realized it was his brother. "Jamal, what are you doing here and in that uniform?" Rami said, rubbing his fist. "Rami, when the Iraqis overran Kuwait City, they rounded up all the young men. We had a choice: join the Iraqi army or be shipped to Iraq to work in their factories. I chose this. We all chose this," he said, pointing at the others in Iraqi uniforms. "We are all from Kuwait City." The others were all smiling now. "Rami, you must take us prisoner and get us out of here. There is almost no food in the city and morale is very low. They are just waiting for you to invade the city. Everyone is afraid of the planes and bombs. Please take us prisoner," Jamal pleaded. Rami looked at Lieutenant Iqbal, who was as surprised as anyone. "Rami, is he truly your brother?" Iqbal asked. "Yes, he is," Rami said, as he threw his arm over his brother's shoulder. "Then you may take them all prisoner and march them back to our positions. They must leave their weapons and don't forget to get the bread, but we must hurry. You will probably be promoted for capturing so many of the enemy, but don't tell anyone he is your brother, otherwise you can forget the promotion. And stop hugging each other. It is embarrassing." Chapter 26. Counterattack. 21st April, 1991. 7 Corps Section. ASAB, United Arab Emirates. 7 Corps lead elements had broken through the frontline units of the 45th Iraqi Division and had pushed as far as ASAB and Ali. What hadn't been destroyed of the 45th consisted of either prisoners or those fleeing toward Zayed City or Ghayathi. General Shitna had made it clear that the road to Zayed City was not to be used, but left open for the 52nd Armored Division to use in a counterattack. That plan was now falling by the wayside as units of the 45th were in true panic mode. Instead, the 52nd Armored Division was heading across the desert to Asab. "Rolling Thunder 3, Sabre 6, the commander of the 3rd Armored Cav Regiment said, calling the G3 for the 24th Mechanized Infantry Division. The 3rd Armored Cav, commonly referred to as the 3rd Herd, had worked with the 24th in many training exercises at the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California. The Cav's mission was to screen ahead of the 7 Corps and determine where the enemy's main thrust would come from. They would also screen the flanks of the Corps to ensure no surprise attack approached from the sides. "Sabre 6, Rolling Thunder 3, go ahead." Rolling Thunder 3 have identified lead elements of enemy formation. Appears to be 2 brigades abreast vicinity. Hotel Juliet Tree 4, 7489er. Break. Artillery positions, 2 batteries. Vicinity Hotel Juliet Tree 47489er. How copy? This was the information Rolling Thunder 3 wanted and could respond to. Sabre 6's information was passed to all the units of the Corps, and the Corps Operations Officer was able to respond to this new threat. An hour later, the 24th Mech's G3 called, "Sabre 6, Rolling Thunder 3, over." Rolling Thunder 3, Sabre 6, over. Sabre 6, contact Vulture 6, over. Roger, QSY at this time. Sabre 6 changed frequencies. Vulture 6, Sabre 6, over. Sabre 6, Vulture 6. I understand you have targets, over. Roger, 2 brigades. Sabre 6 provided the locations and then ordered, Commence attack in 1-5 mics. How copy? Over. Vulture 6 copies and is moving into position. Vulture 6 was the commander of the 12th Combat Aviation Brigade. He had 40 AH-1 Apache helicopters, each armed with 8 AGM-114 Hellfire anti-tank missiles, with a range of 11 kilometers. Their attack was being timed to take place at the same time as the ground forces being attacked. As the armor and mechanized forces launched their attack, the Apaches would engage the deep targets deeper in the enemy formations and targets on the flanks of the attacking force. This combined ground and helicopter attack was designed to overwhelming the enemy force, leaving them little to no chance of escape. Captain Matt Pogge maneuvered his company of M1 tanks on the right flank of his battalion, 369 Armor. The engagements at Medina Ridge had taught him some valuable lessons about tank engagements. This was not his first rodeo. However, for the other company commanders in the battalion, it was their first combat engagement. All Black Panther elements, Black Panther 6, hold short of this next ridge until we see what's on the other side, came over the radio. Matt recognized the voice of the battalion commander. The ridge was another 300 meters to their front, and so Renshaw, the tank's driver, began to slow the vehicle and was just barely moving forward as they approached the top of the ridge. Pogge couldn't believe his eyes as the turret crested the ridge. An entire Iraqi tank battalion was spread out before him at about 2,000 meters. He didn't need to request permission to engage. That decision had already been made for him on the command radio. All Black Panther elements engage. Pogge relayed the order to his company, and they did as they had trained to do, hitting vehicles on the flanks first and working into the middle. The Iraqi T-72 tanks continued to press the attack, and were dying in doing so. The rate of fire of the T-72, although equipped with an auto-loading system, it couldn't keep up with a well-trained crew of an Abrams rate of fire. In addition, the accuracy of the T-72s at that range couldn't be matched by the M1s while on the move. Their gun systems didn't have the same type of stabilizer system the M1s had. And lastly, the T-72's accuracy diminished significantly at ranges of over 900 meters, while the M1 tank's accuracy was excellent out to 2,500 meters. Pogge was concentrating on the overall battle, while his master gunner, SSG Hernandez, concentrated on fighting his tank. As Pogge watched in his buttoned-up turret, a flash in the distance and on the flanks caught his attention. Then there were more flashes when he realized that a flight of AH-1 Apache helicopters was on the flanks and engaging enemy vehicles as they saw them. Those Apaches were hitting the follow-on brigade of the 52nd Division or the artillery positions and tearing them apart. That likely meant they wouldn't be dealing with wave after wave of enemy tanks and armored vehicles. 20 minutes later, all was quiet. In front of Pogge's position, beginning at 1,000 meters, there were 42 destroyed and burning Iraqi tanks, and that was just in front of his position. Across the battalion front, columns of black smoke from burning vehicles appeared as an orchard of waving black trees. Thankfully, not one of the battalion's tanks had taken a hit, and no one was wounded. Pogge, like all the soldiers, stared at the sight of what lay before them with mixed emotions. No one cheered. Some wept as they were emotionally drained. The counterattack by the 52nd Iraqi Armored Division had failed. Chapter 27. Decisions. 22 April 1991, 1st Republican Guard, HQ, Al-Hofuf, Saudi Arabia. All night long, reports had been coming in from both Baghdad and frontline units about the battle raging in the UAE. Baghdad was reporting success, but that wasn't the word coming up from the frontline troops. General al-Dulaimi had gotten tired of the conflicting information, and on the previous evening, he'd sent 2 Mi-8 HIP helicopters to the UAE to report back on what they were seeing. Their report was disturbing. "Get me Tahia al-Rawi on the phone," he instructed his aide. Tahai al-Rawi was the overall commander of the Republican Guard forces and worked directly under Saddam's son. Minutes later, the call went through to a palace in Kuwait City, where al-Rawi was enjoying life. "Sir, what have you heard about the actions in the UAE?" al-Dulaimi asked. "We have heard some glowing reports from Baghdad about the success of the Ninth Corps." "Why? What have you heard?" Al-Rawi had learned in the Iraq-Iran war that not everything coming out of Baghdad could be trusted. "My frontline units are reporting that they have been getting stragglers and elements passing through their lines all night, reports of complete units being taken prisoner, whole brigades of tanks being destroyed. He didn't get to finish. "Al-Dulaimi, I am sure that there have been some setbacks with some units, but let's not panic over a few minor losses," al-Rawi said. "Sir, I sent 2 helicopters on a scout mission down there to see for ourselves. They had no problem finding the 52nd Armored Division at night, as their burning tanks have lit up the sky. The scouts couldn't make contact with the Ninth Corps headquarters either. They did see numerous American vehicles, all moving towards Abu Dhabi and along the coast road." "What do you want me to do?" al-Dulaimi asked. There was a long pause before al-Rawi spoke. "Hold your positions. If the situation is that bad, a counterattack would be foolish. Prepare to defend your current positions, and I will get back to you. I must speak with Al-Tikrit and Al-Tai." The phone call from Kuwait City to Baghdad was easier to make than the one from the front lines. Baghdad had seen some strategic bombing attacks, but nothing like what was taking place across the UAE and parts of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. When al-Rawi was able to connect with the people he needed to reach in the capital, he arranged for a conference call with Ibrahim Ahmed Ard al-Tikrit, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, and Sultan Hashim Ahmed al-Tai, the Defense Minister, once everyone could be found and brought in on the call. "What have you heard from the 9X Corps?" al-Rawi asked, trying to sound respectful. "We received a report late yesterday afternoon that the Americans had launched their offense and that Shitna was committing the 52nd Armored Division. After that, we have not had communications with them, as the Americans are now jamming all of our radio frequencies," al-Tikrit explained. "Well, I can tell you what al-Dulaimi is telling me. He has Ninth Corps personnel and scattered units passing through his lines in a panic. He sent scout helicopters to report, and they found the 52nd Division in flames and the Americans on the coast road. From what they could observe, the UAE is no longer in our control." "They could raise no one from Ninth Corps command," al-Rawi said. "If the Americans have overrun the Ninth Corps, then you should have al-Dulaimi counterattack immediately," Al-Tai, the defense minister, stated with some trepidation in his voice. Before becoming defense minister, Al-Tai had been one of the most respected and experienced combat commanders in Iraqi. "And where do you suggest they counterattack? They cannot just plunge off into the desert looking for the Americans. The American Air Force would love that. It would be easy pickings seeing our tanks rolling out in the open. Without air superiority, we cannot go on the offensive," al-Rawi replied. "Al-Tikrit, have you not heard anything from Shitna? Ninth Corps is your responsibility. They report to you. What are you doing to regain contact with them?" Al-Tai asked, with a slightly elevated voice. There was no love lost between Al-Tikrit and al-Rawi. Al-Tikrit was feeling the heat at this point. "I will have to get back to you. The situation in the UAE is very confusing right now due to the jammed frequencies and the lack of communications with Ninth Corps. I am sure the situation is not as bad as al-Dulaimi is saying," Al-Tikrit responded, trying to sound more optimistic than the news they were receiving was. "Do you think he would make up a story like this? Do you think he wants to charge off into the desert with his divisions when we do not have air superiority? He would be insane to do so," al-Rawi almost yelled. "All right, enough!" Al-Tai demanded. He knew the dislike between the commanders of the Republican Guard forces and the regular army forces. "We cannot be having a fight amongst ourselves at this point. Here is what I want done. Find out what the situation is with the 9X Corps and find out fast. Have the 1st Republican Guard Corps immediately put on alert to move, so if we can execute a counterattack, they will be ready. We cannot let the Americans break out of the UAE if it is in fact true that they have overrun the 9th Corps. Let us have another call at noon, Altai said. Others agreed and understood their marching orders. The high-level meeting at the Ministry of Defense featured all the military leaders responsible for the war and the defense of the country. With everyone present, the meeting got underway now that they had a better picture of what was going on in the UAE. The meeting was being chaired by Tariq Aziz, the Deputy Prime Minister. He had called the meeting as he wanted to understand the situation and develop an approach on what to tell Saddam. Heads might roll over the outcome of this meeting. So, General Al-Duri, would you be kind enough to explain what has happened in the UAE and with 9th Corps? Aziz began, wanting to get this meeting started. Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, on the morning of April 20th, the Americans launched an attack from several points in Oman, striking the 9th Corps positions. In the north, an attack was made by the U.S. Marines and a British armored division. In the center, the city of Al Ain was surrounded by a combination of Saudi and Kuwaiti forces. To the south, the 2 Egyptian divisions and 2 American divisions hit the 17th and 10th Armored Divisions. The penetration was made in the south by the American 7th Corps with 4 divisions. On the morning of April 21st, the Americans launched an over-the-beach landing between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, resulting in the capture of Dubai. That afternoon, 9th Corps launched a counterattack with the 52nd Armored Division. When the 52nd Armored Division executed its counterattack, American attack helicopters joined the ground forces and engaged them. Our losses were significant. The Americans, according to CNN, have taken many prisoners in the process, General Al-Duri explained. And to what do you attribute the Americans' success thus far? Aziz asked as a follow-up question. I believe 2 factors contributed to the Americans' success. First, they had a superior-size ground force with a well-established logistic base. I said all along we should have been bombing their supply bases and sinking their ships, but General Al-Duri was cut off mid-sentence when Aziz raised his hand. And the second reason, please, Aziz called in a calm voice. He realized that this could get out of hand quickly with finger-pointing. The Americans have air superiority. Our Air Force has not been seen in days. As long as the Americans control the sky, we are not capable of mounting an offensive operation, General Al-Duri said. Hamid Raja Shala al-Tikriti took offense and jumped into the discussion. So you're blaming this failure by the 9th Corps on the Air Force, who have been the only thing holding the Americans at bay thus far. How dare you? Gentlemen, let's keep this civil, Aziz said, restoring calm. We are not here to place any blame but to determine what we must do for the future. The question really is, do we counterattack with the 1st Republican Guard Corps? Do we hold in place and defend, or do we begin withdrawing? What are your recommendations? There was silence in the room, as no one wanted to lead off this discussion. Finally, Ibrahim Ahmed Abd al-Satan al-Tikrit spoke up. As we do not know the location of the American divisions and cannot reach their logistic bases or attack them from the flank across the empty quarter, I think it would be foolish for us to commit the 1st Republican Guard Corps to a counterattack, especially without air support, limited as it may be, al-Tikrit said. Do we all agree with this position? Is anyone opposed to this? Aziz asked. With glum looks, they all nodded in agreement. So what is our best course of action given the current situation then? Aziz asked, looking at those seated at the conference table. Saif al-Din Fulayi Hassan al-Rawi spoke up. The Republican Guard are our most powerful and best trained soldiers and unit. We cannot waste them needlessly. The 2nd Republican Guard Corps has already held the Americans at Medina and needs to be withdrawn and refitted. I think we should withdraw both the 1st and 2nd Republican Guard Corps and bring them back to Kuwait, where they will have time to put in a proper defense to repel any attempt by the Americans to force their way into Kuwait. If you had left the 1st Republican Guard Corps in the UAE, this disaster would not have happened. Let the Iraqi Corps assume the entire defense of Saudi Arabia and pull the Guard Corps back. Initially, no one responded. They were all thinking the same thing. Al-Rawi spoke directly to Qusay. No one wanted to get on his bad side. They'd all heard the rumors about his zoo near the airport and how he liked to feed his pet animals, with dissenters and people who had gotten on his bad side. For him, it was entertainment. Finally, Aziz asked, "How vulnerable will we be by making this move? And can the IV Corps stop the Americans?" The IV Corps has 8 divisions and should be able to slide east to meet the Americans. Behind them would be the 7th Corps, which has been in position since the beginning and can reinforce the IV. I think this would hold the Americans for some time for the 2nd and 1st Republican Guard Corps to be prepared, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff said. Aziz thought about this suggestion for a moment and looked at the faces staring at him. It would be his decision. "Altai, what do you think?" Aziz asked. I think this would be our best course of action, but what about the American 14th Airborne Corps over in the west? What can we expect of them? Altai asked the room in general. I am not worried about them. They are along the Red Sea, and just like 2 Corps, if they attempt to come west, their logistic tail will be so long, they will run out of supplies long before they reach Kuwait. The forces coming out of the UAE are our threat right now, Al-Rawi answered. Then, gentlemen, I will recommend this course of action to Saddam. Prepare your forces for the moves, which should commence immediately unless you hear otherwise from me. Chapter 28. Offensive Pause. 23rd of April, 1991. 7 Corps, HQ. Al-Ruwais, United Arab Emirates. The 7th Corps had sliced through the 52nd Armored Division and left nothing but burning Iraqi tanks and infantry fighting vehicles in its wake. The lead elements had reached the coastal highway in the early morning hours, which was clogged with more Iraqi vehicles attempting to flee from Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Both 7th and 3rd Corps had a large population of prisoners, much more than was expected or anticipated, especially this early in the offensive. In addition, by a joint forces agreement, the Army was also responsible for taking in any prisoners captured by the Marines or Air Force. Brigadier General Joseph Conlon III was the commander of the 800th Military Police Brigade and responsible for the construction and maintenance of the POW camps. He was a reservist and had served in the reserves for 27 years. In the civilian world, he was a full-time detective with the Suffolk County Police Department in New York. "Bring him in," General Franks said to his adjutant. A moment later, General Conlon appeared through the door of the office that 7th Corps had taken over for its headquarters. Conlon noticed Franks straining to stand to meet him. "Please, sir, no need for you to stand." "Very glad to meet you," Conlon said, knowing that Franks had lost a leg in Vietnam, and it was probably bothering him about now. "Well, thank you, sir. Please take a seat. How is my POW situation?" Franks asked. "Sir, that question is a double-edged sword. It's good that you're capturing a large number of POWs, but it's bad that we're taking in more than we currently have the capacity to hold. We had constructed 3 POW camps at this point. One, a small one in the Marsent sector, one in the 3 Corps sector, and one in your sector. The plan was and still is that once we've secured the UAE, one large camp will be built and all the prisoners moved there, and the UAE will take responsibility for their feeding, sanitation, and medical needs. Those 3 camps are currently filled to capacity with 8,000 prisoners in each camp, but the UAE hasn't designated an adequate facility to handle 24,000 prisoners. If this trend continues, we could be looking at over 100,000 prisoners. The Saudis have indicated that they'll take Iraqi prisoners off our hands once we move into Saudi Arabia, but not before, which sort of makes sense. They're planning on putting all the prisoners at Athala, as it's in the middle of nowhere, but does have adequate freshwater wells and springs. They figure that once they get them there on the one road in the area, they just have to provide shade with Haji tents. No need to put up wire or guard towers. There's no place for the prisoners to go, and if they did leave, they would be dead in 3 days from a lack of water. "Why don't we do that?" Franks asked, half joking. "Wish we could, but we're a signatory to the Geneva Convention. Saudi is not, although they do honor it. We have to go a step further, and I think the Saudis will, as well as we've offered to put a medical unit with their camp." "Okay, so what can I do for you?" Franks asked. "Sir, I've discussed this with the other Corps commanders, and they said if you would agree, they would as well. Your force is positioned the best to continue pressing the Iraqis right now. But if you could hold off for 48 hours from launching any further attacks, then we can turn the prisoners we've taken thus far over to the UAE and move 3 of the camps we've established into your sector for the next phase of operations," Conlon explained. "General, you're asking the wrong guy. Yosak is going to have to sign off on this. I wouldn't mind a 48-hour pause to rearm, refuel, and pull some maintenance. Go talk to Yosak, and if he approves or asks, I'll back you up," Franks said. "Oh God, thank you so much, sir," Conlon said as he stood and saluted. He wasn't sure how General Franks was going to respond to his request. Knowing he was going to back his play made him feel a lot better. Franks returned the salute from his chair and with a smile said, "Now get out of here. My leg is killing me and I want it off. Damn sand gets into it and rubs the hell out of my leg." "General Yosak, General Franks is on the line for you, sir," a voice said over the intercom, and Yosak immediately picked up the phone. "Fred, how are you doing?" Yosak asked jovially. With the success of the campaigns, he was feeling pretty good these days. "Good. I just had a visit from your chief MP, General Conlon. He asked if we could pause the attack for 48 hours because of all the POWs we're bringing in. Their pens are at capacity until we get more built or transfer the POWs to local control. What do you think?" "Yeah, I heard he was making the rounds with you guys, begging for mercy. He has a point. We certainly didn't expect the Iraqis to be throwing in the towel this quickly once the ground war got going. I figured we'd eventually take 100,000 or so prisoners, but not in the first few weeks. This is kind of crazy. Would delaying 48 hours to give Conlon and his crew some extra time be a problem for you?" "No. It would give us a short rest for the troops, a chance to refuel, rearm, and pull some maintenance. It would give the supply guys a chance to move stores forward for the next push. I don't think it could hurt. In fact, it would give the Air Force a chance to pound on the 1st Republican Guard Corps before we get there," Franks explained. "You haven't heard? The 1st Republican Guard Corps may not be there when you arrive. Intel got some message traffic between General al-Rawi, the commander of 1st Republican Guard Corps, and Hassan al-Rawi, the overall Republican Guard commander. Seems they're pulling the 1st Corps back to Kuwait and sliding the 4th Army Corps over to take their place. They're doing the same with the 2nd Republican Guard Corps over in Medina, pulling them back as well. They think since Sifututh Airborne is going north that they may make a hook around and come at Kuwait from the west, so they want the Tui Iraqi Corps to be positioned to repel that. I guess they figured that the 2nd Republican Guard Corps will stand a better chance out of the mountains and in the open desert," Yosak explained. "Damn, now would be the ideal time to hit them then," Franks said, surprise in his voice. "Or the worst. It could be a trap to get us to attack with really just your corps and have you taking on the 1st Republican Guard when the 4th hits you in the flank. We're really not in a position to bring the 3 Corps or the Marines up on the line with you. If we were, then I would agree with you. But since we're not," Yosak said, not finishing his sentence. "So, we take a 48-hour stand down is what I'm hearing," Franks announced. "Yeah, I'll run it by Norm. I think he'll understand. Push out your Cav regiment, but avoid decisive engagements, and your attack helicopters can go hunting too. How's the leg? Yosak inquired, referring to the leg Franks had lost in Vietnam. Hurts like hell. The day had been long, hot, and dusty for the members of D369 Armor. They were down to less than 50% ammunition on the main gun and equally low on the 50 cal ammo. Water was another low point. When the order came to hold in place, it was a welcome call. As the evening approached, everyone dismounted and began pulling the operator's maintenance as well as resupplying the tanks with ammo and water. Fuel trucks would be around later in the night to top each tank off. "Hey, Lieutenant Bagel, how long before we move out?" called out Staff Sergeant Scoville, a tank commander on one of the tanks in Bagel's platoon. His tank was 30 meters from Bagel's. "Not sure. Captain Poggy didn't say. Said for us to just get ready to move as quick as we could, but he didn't know how long it would be before we did move out. Dismount, but keep someone on guard in the vehicles. Get some chow, some water, and some sleep. Tank commanders, come over and let's review today, and look at what might be tomorrow when you have a chance," Bagel ordered. 10 minutes later, the 3 non-commissioned officers that were tank commanders converged on Lieutenant Bagel. Staff Sergeant Scoville was accompanied by Staff Sergeant Wyke and Staff Sergeant Hanner. They each took a 5-gallon water can for a seat. At night, it wasn't a good idea to sit on the sand, especially if one was a tanker and had other choices. Infantry soldiers could get in the dirt, but not tankers. You wanted to try and keep as much of that fine sand and dirt out of the tank as possible, not unintentionally track or bring it in with you. "Okay, let's look at what we did good today and what we did not so good," Bagel started off. "Sir, I thought our fire discipline was pretty good. We were paced and accurate and we maximized the capabilities of the vehicles," Staff Sergeant Wake said. "I agree, but we sort of fell short of designating targets. I noticed several times that some targets were getting 2 hits at almost the same time. We were shooting out of our lane on those occasions. In essence, we wasted some ammo," Staff Sergeant Scoville pointed out. "We also lost track of target priorities at one point, I noticed," Staff Sergeant Hanner added. "What do you mean?" Lieutenant Bagel asked for clarification. This was the first he was hearing about this. "Well, sir, I noticed that at one point this morning when we were cresting the ridge, some of us, and I won't say who, were engaging the BMPs of the 52 and a few BTRs instead of tanks. The priority is tanks for us and air defense vehicles next. Let the grunts take out the BMPs and BTRs," Staff Sergeant Hanner said. "Let's work on all these points tomorrow. I still don't know what the plan is for the future, but—" "Al-salam alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh," came a voice out of the dark of night. All 4 Americans grabbed their weapons and immediately dove for the ground. They could see nothing in the darkness, and their night vision goggles were on the tank. Bagel racked his brain to remember the Arabic phrase he wanted. Someone had said hello and peace be upon you. But what was the one he needed right now? Then it came. "Aktarab mai raf yadaika." "What did you just tell them, Lieutenant? I didn't know you spoke Arabic," Wake commented. "I don't, but I learned a few phrases when you were reading comic books," Bagel replied. Slowly, images began to appear before them, which grew into men doing just what the lieutenant had told them to do. The 4 Americans stood slowly with their weapons raised. "Do you speak English?" Bagel called out as the Iraqi soldiers approached. "I can a little," a voice replied. "Can we have some water, American?" "Stop right there and sit down in the sand. Keep your hands above your heads," Bagel ordered. Slowly, the turret of Bagel's tank rotated towards the Iraqi soldiers. SSG Adams, Bagel's master gunner, had heard the conversation and wanted to be sure he had the Iraqis covered. Cautiously, the 4 approached the group of Iraqi soldiers. Bagel began counting the compliant group. There were 30 soldiers sitting there. More of Bagel's soldiers heard the situation and came over to assist in the processing of the POWs. Some were sent to get water after each Iraqi was searched for weapons or explosives. 3 cases of MREs, meals ready to eat, were given to the Iraqi soldiers along with a demonstration on how to eat them. Some of them looked half-starved. "Sergeant Wyke, take charge here. I've got to report this to the CO. He's not going to believe me, Bagel said. The CO believed him as the same scene repeated throughout the night across the entire front line of 7 Corps. The Iraqi army units were trying to surrender before the American tankers were able to get going again and started their murderous blitzkrieg across the desert again, or the Air Force swooped out of the sky to plaster them with more bombs. Chapter 29. Night Drop. 20th of April, 1991. 1st Brigade, 82nd Airborne, Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. 31 C-130 Hercules aircraft were lined up on the tarmac at Jeddah Airport. It was just after midnight, and the soldiers knew that in a matter of hours, they would be jumping into the start of Operation Desert Storm. As Colonel Kinser stood amongst the troops, he witnessed confidence and professionalism in the soldiers, non-commissioned officers, and officers of his brigade. The flight to the objective would be 4 hours long, so it was decided for everyone to shoot up in the hangar and conduct the jumpmaster inspections there. The first order of business for each soldier was to drain their bladders as, once shooted up, you did not have the capability to take another piss unless it was in your pants. Officers and NCOs were wandering through the soldiers, making sure that everything attached to rucksacks and the soldiers' LBE was properly fastened. Soldiers were assisting each other with their chutes and attaching their equipment, such as their M4 rifles, Dragon rounds, radios, and AT-4 anti-tank rounds. Completely prepared for a combat jump, each soldier had about 160 pounds of equipment on his body. Finally, the word came over a series of loudspeakers. "Jumpers, man your planes!" With the aid of others, paratroopers struggled to get to their feet, helping the man behind them in the stick. Once everyone was standing, the soldiers proceeded towards the aircraft in 4 lines, each representing a stick. Each C-130 held 60 jumpers with 15 soldiers in each stick, 2 rows down the middle of the aircraft, and a row on each side of the aircraft. Once the individuals were loaded, a pallet was loaded on each ramp that would be dropped after the soldiers, containing rations, ammo, batteries for radios, and other miscellaneous items. Finally, all the doors were closed, and the engines moved each aircraft towards the runway. Once airborne, the flight of aircraft moved out over the Red Sea, safely away from enemy air defense weapons. Fighter aircraft watched over the flight of paratroopers, protecting them from any enemy fighters that might venture into the area. Inside each aircraft, most paratroopers went to sleep with their arms folded on top of their reserve parachutes and their heads resting on their arms. If they were tired enough, paratroopers could sleep anywhere in any conditions. The inside lights were turned off as well to aid them in sleeping, and the air conditioner was on to help prevent air sickness. Suddenly, the interior lights came on. Soldiers began waking up and looking around. The 2 jump masters were standing by the back doors and talking to the aircraft loadmaster and crew chief. Both turned and faced the soldiers, holding their hands up with their fingers spread apart. In unison, they shouted, "10 minutes!" The soldiers knew the next 10 minutes would pass quickly, especially once the 6-minute warning was given. These 4 minutes were built in so they could wake up, tighten chin straps, and put away any paperback books or letters they might be reading or writing. Again, in unison, the jump masters shouted, "6 minutes!" holding up 6 fingers and immediately followed by the command, "Outboard personnel, stand up!" Both jump masters raised their arms up from their sides with palms up. Struggling under the weight of parachutes and combat equipment, the paratroopers seated along the sides of the plane stood and formed one line. Once the outboard soldiers were standing, the next command was given. "Inboard personnel, stand up." Those still seated stood and formed their own line. "Hook up!" The command was given with the jump master's index fingers raised above their heads in a hook position. A moment later, when they were sure everyone had connected their static line to the anchor cable and inserted the safety pin. They gave the next command. Sound off with equipment check. The man in the last position inspected the equipment of the man in front of him, starting at the static line and tracing it to the parachute, ensuring that the static line wasn't wrapped around something that would prevent the parachute from opening. Once he did that, he turned, as did the soldier in front of him, and that soldier would check the last man's equipment. Satisfied, he slapped the rear thigh on the left side and sounded off with his stick number. 15, okay. That continued until the first man in the stick pointed at the jumpmaster and announced, all okay. Moments later, the side doors on the C-130 opened, and the jumpmasters commenced their checks to make sure there were no sharp edges along the door that could cut the static line after the jumper left the plane. They also hung out the door to see the drop zone to be sure that they weren't over water in this case. Satisfied, the jumpmasters stepped back and commanded the first jumper to stand in the door. As the jumper did so, he noticed the red light next to the door and stared intensely at it until it turned green. Before the jumpmaster could scream, "Go!" the first jumper was gone, and the stick was rapidly passing through the door. In less than 15 seconds, the plane was empty of all 60 jumpers. The time was 04:30 on G-Day. Staff Sergeant Lopez enjoyed night jumps. The air was cooler and the wind was almost non-existent, which made for softer landings. He stepped out of the C-130 in his tucked position and knew he had a good exit when he noticed that he was immediately looking up at the tail of the plane, and then just as quickly he had swung 180 degrees and was looking at the ground. With 2 more milder rotations, the chute settled down, and he was able to concentrate on the business at hand. Check canopy. Yeah, it looks good. Anyone around me or under me? Nope. Good there. Where's those damn power lines the lieutenant told us about? Over there. Good. And the ocean, way over there. Good. Wow, the port's lit up like a Christmas tree. Looks like I'll be landing in the sand. Should be softer than on that road. Okay, release my rucksack. Feet and knees together, toes pointed down. Don't reach for the ground. Just wait for it. Oomph was the only sound he made as first his feet hit, then his calves and thighs, and lastly his hips. Once on the ground, he made short work of getting out of his parachute harness. As he did, another jumper landed next to him. Before the other jumper could get out of his harness, Lopez heard the first shots being fired. "Who are you and what unit?" Lopez asked the other jumper, helping him out of his harness. "Sergeant Lopez, it's me, Jurgensen." "You okay?" Lopez asked. "I'm good," Jurgensen replied, grabbing his rucksack. "All right, let's round up the rest of the squad and get going," Lopez directed. The squad, platoon, and company had prearranged rally points that were easily identified as they descended. This allowed the company to quickly assembly off the drop zone and move on to their assigned objective. Lopez's company had been assigned a sector on the south side of the port. Within the sector was a compound consisting of 7 large buildings and several smaller buildings. Intel told the company that it was a living area for dockyard workers, but they didn't know much more than that. Moving to the rally point, Lopez found his platoon leader, Lieutenant Bertone. "Lopez, grab your squad and take point. We're going to clear this first building on the southeast corner. It's a 2-story building, supposedly a barracks-type building." He pointed to it on his map. "I'll follow with the rest of the platoon when it's assembled. Questions?" Bertone asked. "No questions, sir," Lopez said, standing up and motioning his squad to follow him. As they moved off, he directed, "Jurgensen, take point," and Jurgensen moved out at a brisk walk to put a distance of 20 meters between him and the squad. Through his night vision goggles, or nods, Sergeant Lopez could follow Jurgensen's movements and hand signals. The ground was level and consisted of hard-packed sand, so movement was fairly easy but devoid of any concealment. If anyone was watching, They were sitting ducks. The one piece of concealment was several trees and bushes along the base of the building, which would restrict some visibility of their movement. As they moved forward, Lopez noticed a single commercial ship sitting at the dock in front of a warehouse. Small arms tracer rounds could be seen in both red and green colors coming from the direction of the warehouses. Someone is in a firefight, Lopez thought. At 200 yards from the building, Jurgensen suddenly took a knee and threw up the hand signal to stop. A closed fist. Everyone immediately imitated his move. All except for Lopez, who in a crouched run came forward to Jurgensen. "Sarge, I heard voices. Someone's awake and moving outside the building," Jurgensen said in a low whisper. Immediately, Lopez motioned for Fire Team A to move off to the right and set up an overwatch position. Then he motioned for Fire Team B to join him. "There's someone moving around outside the building. A team is in overwatch. B, you're going to fan out, and we're going to approach. If we take fire, you know what to do," Lopez said. "Roger, Sarge," the team leader answered. "All right, let's move out," Lopez instructed, and Bravo team began to fan out, creating a separation of 15 to 20 feet between team members. They moved at a brisk walk, not wanting to spend too much time exposed if someone was aiming at them. They reached the outside walls of the building without incident. Lopez waited until Alpha Team joined them before he issued instructions. "Alpha, you take the front door. Bravo, take the back. Watch the window to make sure no one jumps out of a window to go warn others, so leave 2 people outside until the building is cleared. Bravo, give Alpha 1 minute before you come in, just like we did in training at Fort Bragg. Let's go." As they moved into position, suddenly all the lights came on in the building. "Shit, we've lost the element of surprise. No need to be crafty and silent now." "Let's get her done," Lopez thought, as the first member of Alpha Team hit the front door and the second member charged through the broken door and frame. The rest of the team was right behind him, weapons raised, fingers just millimeters from the triggers of their automatic weapons. In front of them were 30 Arab men with wide grins, holding little American flags. A "Welcome Americans" sign hung over their heads. They began cheering and approaching the soldiers, who had not lowered their weapons. Suddenly the grins disappeared from the Arabs' faces. One stepped forward. "You American, yes?" He was hesitant in his speech. "Yes, we American paratroopers. Who are you?" Lopez asked. The grin returned as the Arab turned and said something to the group. Facing Lopez again, he said, "We work port. We like Americans. We afraid Saddam's soldiers come back. Welcome. Want cold beer?" Suddenly the weapons were lowered and new friendships developed.
Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another video.
In the meantime, we have plenty of reading material to keep you busy. You can find it all on our website, frontlinepublishinginc.com.